That's you, David. See, look.
All right.
Look,
Good
I tell
afternoon,
David
everybody.
that every week.
Yeah,
He's like,
I know. I got multiple machines going on, so I get a little lost in all the technology.
no worries, man.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Common Grounds for Self-Determination weekly podcast. What episode is this, gentlemen? 39 or 40? We're up there, right?
Something like that. We got to go look at it.
Yeah,
We'll get it out there
something
for the
like
people,
that.
though.
Yep. Got a little. There you go. My name is David Castillo, one of the co-hosts. We were out last week, so we appreciate everybody hopping back in today. If you're watching us now, make sure that you like and share with your networks wherever you're listening to us. And we'll do that reminder a couple of times, like in the first part of the show here, just to make sure we're able to engage with our audience members. So yeah, we're glad to be back today. It's Friday, every week, 3 p.m. Pacific Coast time, 6 p.m. East Coast time. And today we've got a very relevant and timely topic before we get into it, but we're going to talk about some of the recent activity around the country with teacher strikes that are keeping young people out of schools, especially on the heels of a 2-year, school shutdown. And so we're gonna get into that. That's our topic today. We'll do our best to keep it on the level, keep it try and be as objective. But again, we're not journalists. We all have our opinions, and we're going to share those with you today. So with that said, let's do a quick check-in. Let's go to Omar first. It's been 2 weeks, Omar. So how have you been? How have things been at the school in El Paso and Tejas?
Yeah, man. What's going on? It is nice outside. It's like 70 degrees outside. It is spring already in El Paso. My bad, Charles. You ain't going to see that spring for like another 3 months. I remember going to school in Boston.
It was 70 degrees yesterday, and today is
all right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. That makes me happy. I remember being in Boston, and it was freezing, and there were the snow walls that essentially, there's so much snow in Boston that when they kind of excavate it off of the roads and off the sidewalks, it just builds up, and they make these enormous walls, and it looks like Game of Thrones and shit. And then it gets black because of all the soot and pollution and everything else. So you're just walking these like black cavernous, like caverns of sadness for 6 months. And I remember being like, oh man, it's March. Oh, thank God. This stuff's going to go away. And someone's like, what? I'm like, it's March. It's springtime. They're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, I went to school in California, from Texas. It's March. They're like, yeah. That's not how it works out here. You ever heard that thing, April showers bring May flowers? And I'm
Absolutely.
like, oh, that's for real? So that was the first time that I realized that it rained all of April and then didn't really get warm until the end of May. So I'm happy that it's sunny in El Paso. I'm wearing shorts today. It's nice. We're on spring break. It's much needed. I think everyone on the planet, especially if you are in schools, needed a spring break. And we're on our spring break this week. And I usually work a lot over spring break. This spring break was work light, which was desperately needed. So hoping to come back and finish out the year, but it was a really tough year. We're going to talk about that during this topic. So things are okay. We're holding in there. How you all doing?
Man,
awesome. Dr. Cole,
man,
how you doing?
I'm good, man. I am just got back from being out working with this gentleman in the top corner, and you will have an opportunity to see the three of us doing some work together soon at some point. I'm very hopeful, but been in just on the road, man. I don't know. I was at South by Southwest. That was pretty cool. I had 2 sessions there, and then I was at in New Orleans with Mr. Castillo, and we were presenting on just some of our work around why you need Black and brown charter schools, and from the voices of Black and brown kids. Though I had already did the Black version, now we're doing the brown version. It was just really interesting to hear where some of these young people, how they're relating to this stuff, and just having these type of conversations. And then came home, where I'll be here for not very long, and then back on the road. But I'm looking forward to being in Memphis. See Miss Sarah Carpenter, the one and only, very soon, and her people, and then Oakland and a few other places. So you know, it's all good. Life on the road is the life that I've chosen, and I'm grateful for it, and I thank God for it every day. Albeit, I need to make sure I don't develop bags under my eyes. How is the black-haired bandit though? You know what I'm saying? How is our supermodel doing? Well, we went to him already. I just,
Yeah.
you know,
I'm
I know.
good,
I'm like,
man.
I
The
I know he's
didn't
not
talk to
talking
him
black-haired
about
about
bandit,
me.
man. Things are good. We
all
gotta
he
talk.
did
We
was
gotta
talk
check in
about
with
the
our
weather. Like all he did was talk about the weather. He didn't talk about like himself, his hair. He didn't talk about. I just was curious, but
So
you
much
know,
to discuss, man. So much to discuss with
Padre
his hair,
Island,
man.
anything for
It's getting
spring
long,
break?
man.
I
South Padre Island. No, man. I'm in El
I
Paso,
know.
man. We're closer to Los
Are you
Angeles
really
than
in
we
El
are South
Paso
Padre
though? I
Island.
think that's a green screen behind you because you've been on the road. You've been chilling. See,
I've been
we
on the
both been on
road.
the road. I've been on the road working, and he's been
Mm.
all through Europe. He's so good at traveling on the road. He got in and out of Europe before the war even broke out. So you know we'll
That's
do a
exactly
whole other
correct.
show on that.
Point.
Mr.
Good
Castillo,
point.
brother,
Good point.
is it the
The
beard of knowledge or
man.
wisdom, Omar?
I believe it's the beard of knowledge, but we can ask Alonso. He's
I
the
mean,
one that coined the term, and he's on our show today.
Okay.
He's
Yeah.
in our audience, man. So, but I
Let's get
believe it's a
some
beard of
listener
wisdom.
let's get some listener feedback there. Yeah. So I was in New Orleans last week. Had the
We're on the wrong
pleasure and
screen.
the honor of
Oh.
being able to present and collaborate with Dr. Cole and Omar in this project that we're working on. And so we kind of presented a brief sort of check-in status update on this research project that Dr. Cole had mentioned. And I hadn't done that in a while. It was really good, number one, to be back in like the physical space with fellow educators. Beard of knowledge, here we go. And I think the other thing, which I didn't really think about, is I don't normally get nervous for those things. We felt prepared. We had done our prep work, but then I realized I'm like, we've got Sharif in the audience. We've got Dr. Fuller in the house, like in our group in our session, and I got a little nervous, but I just tried not to focus on them and focus on the other people. But we definitely had a very well-rounded, amazing group of people that took the time to attend our session, and so I'm grateful for that. And I think we all got a lot out of it. Back in San Diego now, and I think this is related to what we're going to talk about today. I know it is, and I don't want to be misconstrued because I can, on a good day, I can be accused of teacher bashing, right? But I want to make the distinction, and I'll give you an example between like teachers and a union, right? And union leadership. I know there is some crossover and correlation, but really, in my eyes, I see those as two different things. And so I had the pleasure of picking up my son today, who was out all this week for his 6th grade camp up in the local mountains here. And, all the parents showed up at about noon at school. Buses came in, the kids were hella musty, and just kind of dirty. And they were happy. They were happy, but they look rough, man. The teachers go with the kids, they chaperone them. And I've done that before too, but never for a full week. And so I found his 2 teachers that were chaperoning the trip, and I pulled them aside. And I thanked them. I said, God bless you for doing this work, especially coming out of the pandemic, so that young people, our children, can take advantage and experience these like rites of passage, right? And they take time out of their personal lives to do it. And they were both so grateful and gracious, and said, this is our favorite part of the work. And so I have a deep appreciation for teachers that are, working in classrooms, supporting students, supporting families, supporting themselves, supporting others. So kids can, number one, have a good and positive and healthy relationship with school, and then also that they're able to take advantage of these other types of opportunities where teachers have to like walk away from their personal lives to chaperone kids. I think we've all done that in some way, shape, or form. So I wanted to make sure that I said that. And he had a really good week, a positive week. It's a big, like I said, a rite of passage. He's 11 years old. It's a big step in developing, independence from mom and dad. And so, yeah, I just wanted to put that out there before we jump into our union bashing section of today's show.
Well, I don't think it's going to be a
No,
bashing session. I think it's just going to be an honest conversation, right? Like, I think, listen, let's just start off the rip. There's been a lot of great things that unions have done. There's around, you know, the what actually is a work week, how many hours are in that. You know, if you read The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, you learn very early why like unions are needed or whatnot. However, there's also another part of that history that we tend to not share. And it's funny because every time people talk about choice or charters or whatever, they talk about racism. But when they talk about unions, racism never comes up. And it's been a thing that Black people have had to deal with since the beginning of time, whether it was, I mean, since not time, but since unions started in this country. There's an amazing article by the one and only Booker T. Washington in The Atlantic from 1913. That's how long The Atlantic's been around, where he chronicles this racism. There's times when, you know, Black people came back from war and weren't able to get those jobs, and unions kept them out willfully, kept them out of those. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff in there. And so when you talk about students and school and teachers unions, and now you're talking about what a majority of kids that are in these schools that continuously strike tend to be Black and brown, but the majority of those teachers are not Black and brown. And then some of these issues that we just named out, like, we just have to have a conversation about it. And if you are listening, we would love for you to share this, comment, share with a message, tell people why they should come and join us in this conversation. And if you have thoughts on teachers unions, let us know, good or bad or indifferent. Join us in our conversation. But I just think that we are at a critical place, as you've put it, David. You said that kids have been out of school for nearly 2 years, and one of the tactics that we've seen just overused in the last 5 or 6 years has been, it's always strike. It's always strike, and we know who that tends to hurt. So I didn't want to steal steam from you, but I just wanted to we'll acknowledge where they're great, and we'll also acknowledge the very real issues that plague people that look like us or where our kids happen to be.
Absolutely, yeah. I think
I have notes. I got note cards.
Oh, damn!
Prepared. So yeah, that's a great point. A couple of other things that we'll jump into. Number one, we'll start off by talking about like what's happening right now. There are probably other places and regions and districts where this is happening. We're just getting the stuff that's coming up that's being reported on in the media. So there's surely more, but this is kind of what is being shared on the news feeds. So right now, what we know is that teachers are striking in Minneapolis, right? Not St. Paul, because I think it's like two different districts or something. So Minneapolis, there's been an ongoing strike, and I mean they're out there on the picket line. It's freezing, man. I mean, it's this is not an easy thing to do, but those schools, like so many others, were shut down for 2 years, and just shortly after they reopened and people start to kind of get back to ordinary life, talking about parents and caregivers too of children in these schools, the schools get shut down again. And so that's one region. The Bay Area is also another region where we're seeing a lot of this happen. There's already been a strike that's occurred and has been resolved at a school district in Marin County. I think Cotati Rohnert Park, which is in like Marin, Sonoma area. And we're also seeing that Sacramento Unified, so large, school district, may be going on. They've voted to authorize a strike, which may start next week, right? And so you kind of see these things playing around in particular regions. And sometimes it can spread like wildfire. Remember a couple of years ago, the big Red for Ed movement took place in many major cities across the country. I don't know if we'll see that now, but the reason we wanted to bring that up is because it's an interesting time. Charles spoke to it. We're coming out of a crisis, and so depending on how you see things, teacher unions bargain with districts. And they bargain over all kinds of things. And many of these things have nothing to do with actually educating children. And so in this situation, I believe what we're seeing are teacher unions that are taking advantage of some of the chaos and disruption of the COVID shutdowns and then going back into strike. And some being really hardcore about, wanting to continue to mandate indoor mask wearing. For others, it's about staffing and about class size and about compensation. Some of the more common things that we see. I think it was Minneapolis. There was one of the issues there were that they are very short-staffed in and around substitute teaching. And so that's one of their big demands. And I don't know how a strike will produce more substitute teachers, maybe higher pay, but it doesn't make sense to say like, oh, children's learning is being interrupted because we don't have subs, so let's just shut the whole thing down. It seems like they're going in the wrong direction as opposed to doing everything they can do to keep schools open. So those are a couple of the regions that we know. I think also in West Contra Costa, which is in the Bay Area also, potentially seeing some strike activity happening. And so many of these districts, as Charles alluded to, serve a high percentage of Black and brown students, low income. The other interesting thing, I had a Twitter conversation today with Chris Stewart. He called something out, which is I think you'll probably see across many of these regions. Imagine schools being shut down for 2 years. They reopen, people are getting their lives back to whatever normal means to you. And then all of a sudden the schools get shut down again. Now I can tell you if that happened in my district here, there'd be, warfare. Parents would rise up. What's happening is in many of these urban areas, you have such a disconnect between the educators and the children who attend those schools, right? I think in Minneapolis, Chris said something like 10% of educators live in the district. So 90% are driving in, right? And I know Oakland has the similar situation, West Contra Costa May, and I'm sure Sacramento does too. So what you have happening, and I'll leave it here and then we can talk about it, is sort of a loss of what I call natural accountability to the community, right? Natural accountability to your community means you are from, you attended, and you live in the community where these schools are, right? You don't get to get in your car and drive home to the next town or the second town over, to not face your neighbors, right? And have conversations with them. And so I think we see that also with police, right? Police unions. I know in Oakland, California, I know in Los Angeles, more than half of the police officers that work in a city don't live in those cities. So you lose accountability, right? They don't have to live next to these people and be accountable to them at the grocery store, at the cafe, wherever it might be. And so I want to start there and just get your initial thoughts on what we just opened with. And you can take it whichever direction you want to go to, and then we'll do the next round. Anybody?
I know we can let O go. I know his dog wanted to be in the conversation, so we'll let O start.
I mean, the dog was already all up in there. He was like, man, I got things to say. Bon's got opinion. I've got notes. So I'll be precise about a few things. One, I think collective organizing is a good thing. So since the advent of the industrial age in the United States and the world, and with working conditions being what they were, organized labor has fought for things like the 8-hour workday. Interestingly enough, we're now fighting for the 6-hour workday and I think the 4-day week. I'm in. Educators are like, it could never be done. But I got to tell educators, like, y'all aren't very efficient. Like, we've got major gaps that we need to create, but like, I'm in for that conversation. Labor unions created the weekends. Labor unions created a minimum wage. These are all things that I feel very positive about. And with the advent of the public education sector, as we all know it today, that really kind of like got its movement in the 30s and 40s and 50s, kind of the way that it looks right now, because it's the same as it looked in the 50s in many respects. Those teacher unions wound up doing a decent job of ensuring that their rights were also significantly more equitable. What I think has gone on today is that while unions still serve a purpose, and certainly getting organized is an incredibly important thing. And I know David will talk about that later with a very good example that I think is emblematic of where organizing goes right. You have a scenario where you now have a more equitable court system, hopefully. We're getting there. It's getting better. You have organizations like the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission. People know their rights a lot more. So as a charter school leader and someone who runs an organization, like, I know all the things that I need to do in order to not just be ethically correct in terms of how we treat our employees, how we take care of them, how we support them, and not being arbitrary about like dismissals and stuff, but also like very ethical about payment, everything else. There are a lot of organizations now that enforce that and help with that are not the labor unions, the teacher unions, excuse me. So in the historical context, I see unions as something that's very positive. I still see organized labor very important. I still see people getting organized very important. The thing is that while I'm all for teachers getting paid more, it is a weird and interesting thing to have a group of privileged people that run these unions organized a group of other pretty privileged folks to essentially tell teachers, this is the time that we're going to strike when things are the most vulnerable, thinking about ourselves. So let's strike now in order to get better pay, in order to get better circumstances, because this is when we're going to hurt them the most when they need us the most. But the thing that I have seen is emblematic of the unions is that the unions don't give a shit about kids. Yeah, I just said it. Mm-hmm. The teacher federations don't care about kids, don't care about results, don't actually have any scientific data about what is best in the classroom, do not make decisions based on science, are not scientific experts themselves, nor are they expert educators. You have a group of like insipid hoodlums who are absolutely tyrannical in their depravity and their obsession with keeping power. Now, that depravity and that obsession with keeping power has led to, why don't we strike in the middle of one of the worst circumstances that we've seen in the last century and ensure that kids are now once again getting the worst of the worst because they can't vote and they can't make a difference. So my opinions of the Federation are even worse now, because what you've done is, instead of collectively saying, how do we make things better for kids and then collectively work to make things better for adults, let's take advantage of this vacuum and use it to our advantage and have everybody strike in order to ensure that like the circumstances for the adults get better while creating such horrific consequences for the kids. We've seen that the COVID pandemic has led to a 10-year loss in math and a 5-year loss in literacy levels nationally across the board on average. That's science. So when we talk science, but the labor unions talk in platitudes, anecdotes, and bullshit rhetoric that honestly makes me feel like they're just a group of like circus clowns.
Yep.
And like, great, you're wonderful for entertaining, but like, you're not really good at educating.
Right.
Charles,
so
let me throw one
that's
thing.
That's just like, you know, how I feel about that.
You're good. Go ahead, David. You're good.
So another thing that might be helpful for our listeners, and just so you know, the three of us obviously are on the same page too. You know, right now we're talking about public sector teacher unions, right? Government employees that work for the government, right? And in their negotiations with their employer, which is the government, which is taxpayer funded, there is zero transparency. So when they talk about bargaining and negotiating, these are things that happen 100% out of the purview of the eye of the public. We have no idea what happens. They go into a room, somebody's taking notes somewhere on, you know, some ripped up napkin with disappearing ink, and they come out and, you know, they make a statement, right? There's zero transparency around the way that public school teacher unions negotiate with our school district leadership. And, we're talking about the heart and soul of democracy, democratically elected school boards, billions and billions of dollars going into these systems. And the public really has no say in this whole process, right? So I wanted to make sure that our listeners understand that what we're talking about is kind of a black box. We don't really know what's happening in those discussions. We can guess. I've been in some of them, but I wanted to put that out there. Charles, what's your response to this first round?
Yeah, man, I think it's a lot, man. And first off, thank you, Alonzo and Kayla and anybody else. Let us know you here. Drop something in the comments. Join this conversation. And if you haven't, like and share. Comment with us. Let's have a conversation. I would say this, man. I think that the frequency at which the nuclear trigger is being pulled, that is striking, is being overused. And I think that they're going to start to lose a lot of this goodwill that they felt was ironclad and untouchable. And we saw that first domino fall with the police union. For a long time, police unions were untouchable. You couldn't say anything about unions. You couldn't suggest it, like they were just super strong. And then you had that awakening, and people were like, no, we're going after these unions because they producing like bad fruit. So we got to get to the seeds. We got to dig this up and get to the seeds. And I think when that happened, I think the gloves came off for its sister's organization, which is teaching. You know what I mean? Listen, man, it's a lot of white teachers whose husbands or spouses are part of that same that police union. And I think that it started to ask a central question. So here's the thing. I'm okay if you gotta strike because situations are just so poor and unsafe and untenable for you and for students. Then you gotta do what you gotta do. Get what you need to, set it up for collective bargaining or whatnot. I think there are other ways that you can negotiate without always going instantly to strikes. But here's my question: as I react to this, none of these strikes are because of our incredibly low academic success rates with Black and brown children. Why is it that these people are over Black and brown bodies in such mass? Like, it's so many, right? In a system that already systematically got rid of Black teachers through Brown versus Board. Like, so why is it that in that same system where we are missing crazy amounts of Black teachers to the point where I'm doing reports and children are crying in the report and leaders are crying because they're just not used to having Black leadership? Why are none of these strikes about, you know what, we're going to strike until we get what we need to make this a better system, and we're going to hold ourselves accountable in this? Because here's the thing. Teachers can strike with no consequence in those districts. Let parents say, I'm going on strike, and keep their kid home for 20 days. There will be a knock at the door. Child endangerment. You cannot, it's crazy, man. So my reaction to it is that it's not a good tactic, David and Omar. It is being overused, and the boy has cried wolf far too many times. At this point, you either want to do the job or you don't. And this is not aimed at teachers. I think there's a lot of teachers that actually don't feel like they get a lot of say in their union at all, actually. I think there's a lot of people in their unions that feel like, yo, I don't want my money going towards that. I don't want my dues going towards X, Y, and Z. And I would say to you, there should be more Black and brown unions or alliances within those groups. Listen, you can win you a teachers union election. If you do a little bit of organizing, you can flip some stuff, right? But I just got general questions, man. And I was gonna save this for later, but we mentioned this. We always talk about racism in other places. This is the one and only Booker T. Washington talking about the Negro and labor unions. So every heroic story that we tell you about unions, which there are, and they're well deserved. Okay, I remember being an undergrad at Cal State Hayward, and they were trying to unionize these coffee farmers, and and these really evil people got wind of it and slaughtered the town. It's some real stuff that happens. That is not in this teachers union. That is not in this conversation. But Booker T. Washington just went through and started asking these leaders of unions, what their take is on black people and why ain't no black people in their union and what needs to happen. And it was very honest. And this was 2 years before his death. So if you could just do a search for the Negro and the labor unions under Booker T. Washington. It will come up because it's like a very sublime like read. And shout out to the Atlantic, who's really been around for a while. You can find James Baldwin in the Atlantic. It's a bunch of people that used to have stuff to say. So I don't want to. I have a lot of things to say, and I don't want to drone on. I'm gonna take a page out of Omar's book and kind of stick to my notes. But if you want to learn, if y'all want to hear and have this real conversation today, I'm here for it. And here's some of my questions, bro. I got to go to the card. Why is it that the teachers in my city that I love of Oakland, California, why is it that those teachers become 1,000% better when they are on the precipice of a strike and are teaching kids, not about the subject, but about the strike and why a strike is important, and they inspire these kids? Like I run an organization that is a think tank that listens to end users, which is students. And I had students say, leading up to that strike, that's the most eye contact I've gotten from a teacher. That's the most I felt welcomed. And I'm like, we're in this thing together. Hell yeah, I'll leave class and walk with you. I'll be with you. Why you wasn't like that when you was teaching saucer? Why wasn't you like that when you was teaching kids algebra? Why wasn't you? Why does it take for that? Oh, is it because there is a selfish motive around this stuff? And because here's the thing, I just thought a lot of people couldn't teach, David and Omar, and that's actually less sinister, because now I'm finding out that you actually can teach when you put some effort into it. So that's just my first question. Why is the strike never around just how poorly we are educating black and brown kids? And I promise y'all, I said this and I'll shut up. I know I just said I would, but I will after this. I promise you, if this was black women and brown women that were the majority in this way, and the majority of the kids that they taught were white kids, were lily white kids, and these were the same conditions, and these people were trying to strike as much as they are right now, tell me what you think would have happened. I'm just so curious to know. David, take your show back, man. Because I don't think a strike would have happened given that last scenario that you put out there. So yeah, I think that goes back to my earlier point of like natural accountability. There's no accountability because you have a teaching demographic, race, and even where they live that is, fundamentally off from the communities that they work in. And so again, you don't have to face your families, at the grocery store, at a restaurant, on the street, at a cafe, because you don't live there. And so you just don't have that kind of buy-in to the work. So it does make it easier to strike, in my opinion. I think one point I want to make, and then I want to talk about student outcomes, is that I want to be clear. We're talking about, the origins of labor organizing in this country. We're mainly talking about labor unions that operated in the private sector to protect workers from private corporations, right? What we're talking about now are public sector unions that are mainly white collar, mainly white people, that are essentially designed to protect government workers against government. So in Oakland, it's a classic example, right? In this sort of battle of labor versus management, you have to have a villain. You have to have a boss, right? And what does that look like in Oakland, California? That looks like an African-American woman by the name of Kyla Trammell Johnson. She doesn't play the good role of the villain or the evil boss. And so what people have to do is make up other evil entities that people can direct their anger and frustration towards, like charter schools or these other nonprofit organizations or education reform or whoever else it might be. It's a really weird thing to see. You're like, okay, well, where's this energy being directed towards? Because if you're running a school district, it's one person, it's the superintendent, right? They run the show. And so I want to be mindful that we are talking about those types of unions. My parents were members of the United Farm Workers. When I think of organizing in labor unions, I think of blue collar, I think of farm workers. That's what my parents did.
I think of the treatment that not just farm workers get at the hands of private farming and agricultural companies at their hands, but I also think in a state like California, the way that Governor Gavin Newsom caters to the California Teachers Association versus the way that he will barely pick up the phone for the United Farm Workers, even though he loves taking his picture with the Lotus Huerta whenever she comes to town. He just recently vetoed a bill in California about 6 months ago that would have made it easier for farm workers to organize and to vote to form a union via mail-in ballots, right? Because of pressure from corporations in California, right? And so we're not talking about a binary situation. We're actually talking about a very convoluted, extremely political situation. So I want to be clear on that. I think even though Gavin Newsom is a Democrat and California is a Democratic state, all unions are not created equally. And we obviously saw that with the police unions too. Going back to the topic, I just had a rant on Newsom for a second there. As a former school leader, and Omar, I'm sure you too, and Charles, running your organization, whenever you're going to make a shift and you feel like either your employees or you need to make a shift in resources, your teachers are asking for more pay or more prep time or more resources. The whole point here is that you never say no and that you research it with them. And whenever you research it, if teachers want more pay, if they want better benefits, you've got to lay out the whole case to the community, right? And, I've done this before without a union. You can move a lot quicker and be a lot more responsive and actually save resources. But at the end of the day, you have to have numbers attached to it. If we're going to do this change, how will life be better for the children? So Washington, D.C., we just saw some stats come out from 2019 to 2021 in D.C., and these are relatively high numbers for the California numbers. For African-American students, literacy proficiency went down from 44 to 28%. White students, 73 to 70. Latino students, 42 to 30. So massive drops in literacy for Black and brown kids, not so much for white. So I'm just wondering, in Minneapolis, in Sacramento, in Marin County, in West Contra Costa County, in Oakland, when people fight, are they willing to put numbers to the fight? Let's get this money, let's get our pay, and we're going to work towards these very clear goals, these outcomes that will impact children in a positive way if we hit them.
Right. I
don't hear that happening.
Man, I feel like we just in the conversational part of this piece, man. I'm listening. I'm just. Would you stand with students, parents, and community leaders if they struck against you and your colleagues the way that you want these kids and parents to stand with you during your strike? When there are organizations right now suing states because of educational malpractice. Oakland Reach is one of those organizations that's suing the state because of that stuff. Detroit got sued because of this stuff. Like again, we are not having a conversation about the full education system. We are more so talking about schools and systems and districts that tend to serve people that look like us. And I'm just baffled at it, man. And again, I'm not bashing anybody. I'm not bashing the profession. I'm not bashing unions. But here's what I want us to be very honest about. Just know the level playing ground that we're on. A teacher's union's job is not to protect student interests and community interests. The
right.
Teachers union's job is there to protect teachers from whatever type of work conditions. That is their job. Like, I just need us to understand, because this is one of the only places we can conflate what that union's job is. So for instance, I love basketball. I love the NBA. The NBA players union's job is not to look out for the fans. It's not to look out for coaches. It's not to look out for owners. It is to look out in the best interest of those players. That is its job. All right. Fire department. The fire department union's job is not around like the gardener. It ain't around like, all these. It's to protect firefighters. So let's just start. People, if you think that the union's job is to safeguard your children, then you are already 50 yards behind the 8 ball. Like, and if we know that they have another goal in mind, now you can show up in a different way, because the same way y'all ask for accountability for charter schools and board meetings and stuff like that, I said this when I worked in the district. I said, well, can we open up the union meeting too then? Can parents and students see exactly what's happening in the union meeting? The same way they get to see it at the district, the same way you can go into a charter school meeting, the same way you can be in a city council meeting. Can this meeting, because I bet you if parents and students were able to hear how this entity talked about them, talked about their children, talked about their parents, talked about their negotiating points, talked about their tactics with no regard for what students would not get, I promise you a tide would shift even stronger and harder than one that you saw for the police union. And I bet a lot of teachers would also be like, I don't want to be a part of that. That I need a new body. What would it look like for a new body, a new union body that is a Black and brown teachers union with membership of students and families, where the actual point was student outcomes and achievement. Mm-hmm. And it says we want to make sure students and families are safe as we get this achievement, as we're getting it. We want to make sure teachers are safe as we get to this academic achievement. But what if we had that type of group where achievement was the linchpin?
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say one thing. I'm butting in, and I'm going to let Omar go. But I want to add this in there. I'll add one thing, Charles, with your permission, and that's also a union that believes in open and transparent negotiation. So we don't need to know what your particular salary is, even though we can look it up on the public website. But like when you're having these negotiations around bargaining, around student learning conditions, open the door, let the public in. Maybe we don't get a vote, but at least open the door, provide transcripts, because that's all taxpayer funded activity right there. And it's amazing that they're able to get away with doing this stuff in closed rooms in the back room of some pizza joint somewhere in Hoboken, New Jersey. Sopranos reference. Omar.
I got you. Yeah, man. I have a question, I have a story, and I have a comment. My first question is, when I look at strikes across the United States that teachers are organizing with the federations, what is this strike really for? I think it's a valid question. I think that the unions would be very quick to say it's for the safety of the teachers and safety of the students, like it's out of control and with COVID and everything else going on. And I'm like, cool, where's the science behind all this? Mm-hmm. Are people dropping like flies? Are we having infection rates at schools that are getting astronomically high? Where is the data and the science behind this? Because as you whip into a histrionic fury that's as frothy as a milkshake, I don't see a whole lot of evidence backing up what you're saying. If the strike then becomes, is this for increasing teacher pay? Then I want to have a conversation about that really quick. Doc, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, a real doctor. I say it every show. This man is a real doctor. The man's done his research. He actually has a degree. He knows what he's talking about. Because I don't know how many people in the Federation are real doctors. Doc, you're a political scientist by study, as am I, as David is to a certain extent. Y'all seen the movie Dave? Chris Klein back in the 90s.
Long time ago.
Badass movie.
Really remember it.
Long ass time ago. So here's the general premise, and this is going somewhere. Dave,
we trust you. Go ahead.
Wonderful man. Yeah. Follow me for a second. Dave's
not here.
Who finds who finds jobs for people in the community. It just turns out that this man is literally the doppelganger, like the identical twin looking dude, to the president of the United States. The president is very sick. The Secret Service and everyone else doesn't want to have the country know that he's very sick. So they find this doppelganger to kind of like come in and act like the president for a little bit and ultimately follow the chief of staff's absolute word on what to do and how to do it, which is a satirical situation about what happened with George W. Bush. Not George W. Bush, excuse me, George H.W. Bush, who himself a very smart man, but buckled at his chief of staff's whim because, you know, dude was kind of a coward. Said it. Anyways, while this very good man is playing the role of the president, he starts getting into all these endeavors and starts looking at the budget. And his chief of staff is like, you can't keep doing this. If you want to get rid of this program, then you got to find like, you know, $47 million to help these like homeless people. And he's like, oh, okay. So he sits down with his friend, Charles Grodin, who is an accountant, and they literally start doing the numbers. And they start taking away at all these useless programs, useless expenditures that are, you know, in many ways cronyism, because like, I know this person at this company, so we're going to give them a ton of money. And, you know, that's how our superintendent in El Paso went to jail. And they found all this money and they were able to save this like homeless shelter, right? The president of the United States in this movie, doing a satirical analysis of the federal budget, basically reconfigured the budget and made some very difficult choices in order to actually help where help was needed. So if the reason for the strike was to increase teacher pay, how come no one has pulled a Dave and sat down with the CFO of the school district and done a thorough examination of how many cents on a dollar is going to district overhead and district individuals and district employees, and said to themselves, these 4 people in the district who literally one person could do their job or 2 people could do their job are useless.
Yeah.
And they're getting paid way more. And that money could actually be used to not only increase teacher pay, but provide the supports at the schools so that teachers and everyone else at the campus level aren't having to work as ludicrously hard as they are doing now, because we have found more support there.
Oh, I have an answer.
To add a little bit of oomph. Yeah. To add
Go
some
ahead.
oomph to
So
this,
I mean, if you want to answer now, I can do it quickly.
Oh, no. I've got an anecdote that I want
to. Okay, I'll let you go ahead then.
As a pass-off comment. And the anecdote was simple. Like, I've spoken to a lot of financial analysts at school districts, and their short answer is basically the district personnel do not ask what's in the best interest of the campus. They ask, how do we do things to make our work lives easier at the district? These are people that have not stepped foot on a campus, have not taught, have never had any administrative experience.
Yeah.
They work at the district level, and they are asking the question, how do we make things easier for ourselves? So is this strike really the best mechanism to increase teacher pay? Or is this once again the federations flexing their power because they are finding themselves in a scenario where they should be obsolete?
I mean, I got an answer for you, and I think that was a beautiful anecdote. But first, Alonzo asks, you know, what I find ironic is how hard everyone makes it for educators. Shouldn't we facilitate their jobs? Isn't that common sense? Without educators, we wouldn't have our next generation of educated people. So I'm going to respond to our guest first, and then I'm going to go into my comment that's tied to what you said. Absolutely. Amazing educators are very important in our society. I think that, you know, and I think that we all have a favorite teacher here and there that we want to honor, right? But that still doesn't give them just, you know, the ability to just ride rimshot over like what Black and brown kids need. You know, they always ask me who my favorite teacher was, and I got a few answers, right? But let's say if I had 50 teachers and I can only name 5 or 6 that were actually good or that treated me with an ounce of decency and humanity, then I'm okay with, like, you know, let's relook at this and let's look at this a different kind of way. And I think that I'm not, and actually this isn't about attacking teachers, right? We're talking about an entity of a union whose number one bargaining chip just happens to come at the expense of students and parents. Can you understand? We are making Black, brown, and poor kids, like people are saying something about, you know, Alonzo said this earlier about, you know, the grandma saying that, you know, kids are too much to handle, whatever the case is. But let's put it like this. Let's say I'm a single mom and I got 3 kids, and one of those kids is in kindergarten and one is in 2nd grade. And I work a job that's not COVID friendly, where I can't be at home. I got to be at the joint. And then you announcing a strike the day of. You know what I'm saying? You saying that this happening. Like I need to make sure my kids are good. I need to. So it's not that I don't see it as necessarily daycare, or some people are saying that, and maybe some are, right? But I mean, where's the same compassion that we asking for adults in middle class jobs that have college degrees, many advanced degrees? How is it that we can find all this empathy for them and make them feel like victims, and not these kids that are in these hoods that actually need this school? And oh, by the way, if I don't go, my mama goes to jail. That's one. Two, to what you were saying, this is the reason why that happens. I worked in OUSD, and this is like a few years ago, and I had to get money. I had to get a reimbursement because that's how it is. You put your money up and then you get reimbursed. You know how I had to do that? It wasn't an app, Omar. It wasn't something very quick that I could like take a picture on my phone, send it in or something to get processed, put the code in or whatever. Nah, man, it was a old school triplicate. I had to write on it, and
form with carbon paper,
and I had to take it to Miss So-and-so on the 4th floor, who's been there for 30 years, and this is her job. You know what I'm saying? And Brian Stanley taught me this. Dr. Brian Stanley, who used to run the Oakland Education Fund, because I asked something very similar to you, Omar, and what he said was, "Oh, you thought this was about kids." We are a top 3 economic center for the city of Oakland. There's Kaiser, then there's us. If you look at the economics of cities across the country, school districts are often one of the largest job providers, not just with teaching, but with garbage, with landscaping, with food, with transportation. Like there's so many plugs inside of a district that is more of an economic center than it is a learning center. And what I'm saying is that if I don't love systems, I love people. But if you're trying to save this damn system, you got to take a step back at some point, and you got to start over, and you got to say, what is our priority? Is it to be the economic epicenter of this place, or is it to actually educate kids with fidelity? And I think that that's not the question that's happening. Strike if you got to, it is what it is. But now I'm talking to parents and students. If you at a place that's perpetually striking, and then you look into them numbers, and them kids the black kids is at 8% proficiency, 9% proficiency, or brown kids is at 12% proficiency. And then what'll happen is you start to ask those questions, and then they'll say, but that whole test is racist. Well, everything is racist. I just proved that your union was racist. You ain't got rid of that. You want people to be held accountable to that union. So what is the thing that you're going to put in there in place to make sure that we're okay? You know what I'm saying? Like it's all backwards, and people are building their livelihoods, their careers, and are able to coast. Not everybody, but I'm a black man who has heard from a teacher multiple times from multiple teachers. I get paid whether you show up or not. I get paid whether you learn or not. I'm gonna be good whether you good or not. So yeah, man, I remember what these systems did to me. And I remember every time that there's another option that comes up, now that's the devil. But what about the devil you know? When we going to talk to that, MF?
Yeah. It feels like one other thing. So we're talking about like large government systems, which are inherently bureaucratic. You add on top of it another layer of bureaucratic leadership in the form of collective bargaining units, right? And then you have a very slow moving organization that is almost immune to any kind of innovation, even innovating in a way that might automate some kind of a system so that Charles doesn't have to go to talk to the Miss Wilson on the 4th floor. Sure, she's a lovely woman.
Broke ass carbon
but
paper.
Like, do we really need? Do we really
your ass
need to
back
be
to
doing
Crenshaw
that
Pete with those hot ass coat hangers?
You know, that's wild. So I think, you know, that's the other thing about when we're talking about educating children, and we're talking about, you know, districts being, you know, the reason we don't see innovation happen or the systems are like resistant to it is because it means that people have to move differently or assume new responsibilities or different responsibilities or different schedules. Oh, we got to go back and bargain for that. We got to go back and bargain for that. Look at OUSD that, you know, they bargained for a particular school day and a particular length that doesn't allow kids to have the access to the full breadth of courses that allow them to achieve A through G graduate status. That's bureaucracy, right? Add a 7th period. oh nope, we have a work day. It starts here, it ends there. We can only do what we can do within those parameters. Well, then 70% of your Black and brown kids are going to graduate, if they're lucky, without being able to apply to California's prestigious public university systems.
Mhm.
Right? It's all part of the same issue that we're dealing with. So I'll stop there. I think you guys have been on fire.
Oh.
That's
That's
a
old,
good ass
man.
show, man. Not at all.
Omar,
Well,
what
what,
do you got?
man? No, man. Cole brought it. Cole was like, I'm going to step back today, the doc. And then the doc brought like straight fire all day long. He brought out Crenshaw Pete. He told that chick in HR to go back to them hot ass coat hangers with that boring ass carbon paper. Look, I want to just circle back and maybe make a quick closing statement. David, you brought up a really good point. And Cole, you brought up a really good point. And I got to say to ourselves, like, where is the innovation of which David previously spoke about to say, why can't we do both? Mm-hmm. So if the school district is the economic hub of this community, cool. Mm-hmm. That's not the mechanism that you're supposed to be doing. But like, let's just assume for a second that argument is in fact fair. If the economic modality of a community is contingent upon the school district, therefore, the guiding principle should be, are people being employed? Then why is it that these people who are so intent on striking aren't going in and saying, all of you district people who are just simply working at, again, carbon paper, or the fact that there's 5 of you doing the job of 2 people, great, we will employ you. We will put you at a school. You will be doing something that is going to have a direct impact on the lives of a child and help benefit them immensely. Problem solved. What I think we are looking at here is a much more in-depth scenario of people at the district level who are not capable, not willing, nor do they have the ability and skill set to actually make a differentiation in children's lives. So therefore, the argument deconstructs itself that if your modality is to provide jobs, and then I put in the wrench of here are several jobs that are needed, and then you say no, then your modality has completely deconstructed. So you got to find another modality to educate children. And the stats have demonstrated that that's not happening either. So then what in the living F are these people actually doing? And that should make everyone angry. And that should make parents and children strike. Man. Because ultimately, as teachers go out and strike for the betterment of their own situations, and the districts simply backfire and say, we're trying to figure out what's best for us, we all know that children are left in the dust. But what if the children and parent actually struck and said, if you don't actually get your literacy levels up so that we can survive in this society, not only are we going to strike, but burn this mother down. And that's some Thomas Jefferson shit right there.
Yep.
Listen, man.
Yeah, and I'm not against. I think I'm not against striking. I don't think any of us are. But I think what we're saying and what Omar just said is like, if we're going to do it, let's understand why we're doing it. Let's get buy-in from the entire community. Let's not make it a closed-door decision that we're going to announce the night before we do it. And when we get what we hope to get in the form of pay, time, resources, protections, whatever it is, let's put some numbers to it to say, like, if X happens, then we expect an increase in student literacy proficiency by X percentage points over 5 years or 10 years, or increased attendance, or lower suspension rates, higher graduation rates, better teacher retention, better, schools. Now the new thing, I'm not going to knock it, is like, it's like we can get rid of those standardized tests. People just need to realize public education is about wellness. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? I send my kid to school, to a public school, to be treated well and to develop that part of his person. But I also send him because I expect him to grow and be in a line with his peers around basic things like reading, literacy, and mathematics and science and social science. I expect that, right? And that's what schools are about. So let's put numbers to it. If we can put a math and a reading number to it, let's also put survey data numbers to it. So everybody's taking surveys now, right? So if we think this money is going to make kids feel safer in schools, let's measure what children actually say about that. Let's measure what parents actually say about that and be transparent about it. I'm not against it, but what I am against and what I think is completely irresponsible is to take taxpayer money and continue to pile it into a system with absolutely zero accountability on the back end. And that's what we have right now.
Yo, for my final thought, and then we'll throw it back to you to end this, David, is I just got, do you feel like you can bully Shaq? Anybody here? Do you feel like you're gonna bully Mike Tyson? Like you feel like you're gonna walk up to Mike Tyson and just like thump him in the ear and just be like, do something about it? Like we always
no.
We always talk about the unions like they are just like the teachers union, like they just get picked on constantly. Like people just be picking on these people and all that stuff. Well, I did a simple Google search. I just wanted to see who are the 30 most powerful unions in America.
Wow.
The 30 most powerful. Where do you think teachers unions rank? Just curious. Anybody?
27.
Do they name like are they specific unions or
is it specific unions?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it would have to be either the AFT or the NEA. I don't know where they'd rank out of the top 30.
Well, out of 30, Omar said
AFT
27.
and NEA, man? No, man. Now thinking about AFT and the NEA in the United States,
well, it's separate. So, yeah. You said what number?
I go to 5.
All right. What do you say, David?
The NEA at 10.
At 10? You're both wrong. But you would have got you would have won the money. You would have came up on the Price is Right, Omar. Let's just take a look. They're still going. Number 1 is the National Education Association of the United States. It is it has been seen and recognized as the most powerful union in the union. It is the most powerful one. And it also happens to be serving a population that has constantly not gotten what it deserves, constantly not gotten what it needs. So again, the biggest trick that the devil ever played was to convince people that it didn't exist. These people are they're not being bullied. Here's the thing. You know what's funny? They got so much money that if they wanted to just give every teacher a raise, they could do it. If they really wanted to. So how is the most powerful organization and group that is in charge of Black and Brown learning still okay with 12 and 13% proficiency across the country, but yet and still, when we say something about our accountability, everybody else is racist?
Yep.
The test makers are racist, and maybe they are. Hey, I'm not about to cape for them people. Damn them tests. They say that these is racist, everything is racist. So let me get this straight. If the most powerful entity that is in charge of the body of people doing the work, that is constantly over kids that happen to be Black and brown, that can constantly not read in a system that forces you legally that you have to go and attend those schools, and every time a charter school or some type of alternative education or some type of booster comes along, you then bully those people to get out the way to where charter schools are on a 5-year renewal, but we got schools in communities that have been up for 65 years and kids every single year. How are they being bullied? How?
Okay. So 2000 and what year is this from? This is from probably 10 or 15
Mine was 2020.
Ago. Yeah. So maybe like 10 or 15 years ago, maybe even 20, a top lawyer for the National Education Association, last name was Chanin, giving a speech to a convention of the National Education Association. You ready? Despite what some among us would like to believe, it is not because of our creative ideas. It is not because of the merit of our positions. It is not because we care about children. It is not because we have a vision of a great public school for every child. NEA and its affiliates are effective advocates because we have power. And we have power because there are more than 3.2 million, more today, people who are willing to pay us hundreds of millions of dollars each year in dues because they believe that we are the union that can most effectively represent them, the unions that protect their rights and advance their interests as education employees. I didn't hear kids in there one time.
Nope.
That's my closing
I mean,
thought.
I was just about to say.
And as we close, to be fair, people, that is what a union's job is. So what does a community union look like?
Good topic, future show.
Man.
Shit, man. That's deep. We should just plug it up right there, man. I was gonna say something.
Hey, well, for Omar and for David, I am Charles, and we will see y'all next week. Same bat time, same bat station. Y'all be smooth. Peace.
Always out.